Welcome back. We are honored today to have a fabulous panel of parents. We have Joy, Nikki, Katrina, and Rory may be stuck in traffic. So if someone comes in a little late and ends up here, that's who it is. And I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves to you by telling a little bit about yourself and your family. And so if you could tell us your name, who's in your family, the name and age of your child with autism, how long it's been since he or she was diagnosed, and if you're so inclined, something that you want us to know, just one thing about your child with autism. Just one. Joy could go on all day.
Out which of these, I can hold this. Is this on? Oh, it is. Okay. So I'm Joy. I have two children, Audrey, who is now 18, and her sister Margot is 16. I have single parented them for most of their lives. Margot was 2 when our marriage broke up. So a lot of the information is up there. Audrey was diagnosed with hearing impairment at 20 months, diagnosed with autism around the age of 3 and a half. That got a little muddied by the hearing impairment, so she definitely had autistic types of behaviors going on early on, but we discovered the hearing impairment first and started dealing with that, and then had the autism to work with afterwards. What am I forgetting? One thing about?
One thing.
One thing. These days, now that she's 18, the one thing that I like people to know about her is she is still learning and progressing at a really rapid pace sometimes. That when we first had the diagnosis, there were all these windows that were going to close, and this sense of absolute panic that she had to learn all this stuff, and if she didn't have language by the age of 6, she was never going to have language. All of these different kind of thresholds that we kept passing, and that she had not met those dates on. But I would say the last 2 years, she's made more progress than she did in maybe the 5 or 7 years before that. So that's what I like people to know. She is continuing to grow, and I don't know where she'll be 10 years from now in what she's able to do. So.
Thank you. Oops, we have Nikki.
Hello, everyone. I'm the British one. I have 2 sons, Mac and Freddie. Mac is on the left there, signing squeeze. He wants a hug. And Freddie's on the right. Mac was diagnosed at the age of 3, just after we moved here, and Freddie 2 years later. I just want to say something about this picture and what Lynn was talking about earlier about Facebook happy pictures. When I posted this on Facebook, I got about 200 or 300 likes, and oh my gosh, what a wonderful picture. This was during a vacation where he pushed me to my absolute limits, where his new behavior of, hey, if I throw something and it smashes in front of you, I get this amazing reaction. And it was a behavior that was most of last summer. So whilst this looks like the most dreamy family photo, cocktail hour was being moved forward by an hour each evening. So yeah, Mac is the nonverbal one. When Freddie was diagnosed at 3, he wasn't talking. And so my biggest fear was that he was going to be nonverbal as well. But now he just never, ever stops talking. One thing to know about my children with autism is it's probably more for Mac than Freddie. I really wasn't sure at the age of 3 how he would progress and if he would ever change and if any of his challenging behaviors would stop. He does replace the old ones with new behaviors, but he is progressing in ways that I never thought he would once I stopped expecting him to be a typical kid. So he communicates with an iPad now, and he couldn't look at an iPad 2 years ago. Takes himself to the bathroom now, and things like that I never thought he would do. And I run a Facebook group called Autism Moms of Seattle.
Thank you, Nikki. Katrina.
Good afternoon. I'm Katrina, and I have a 17-year-old son, Arthur, who has autism. I also have a daughter who's now 19, and she's typically developing. She's the little one there who's now 5'9" and flaming red hair, and it's a great kid. So Arthur is actually here today, and thanks to Dr. Wilson, 2 psych students are with him roaming the university. So I asked Arthur if he wants to pop in, so maybe we'll get an appearance by Arthur towards the end. So Arthur was diagnosed at 2, actually 20 months. He had pretty pronounced symptoms, the classic red flags, not responding to his name. We thought he had a hearing problem, limited eye contact, seemed really disconnected from the world. And because I had a daughter who's a little older than him, these really were pronounced to me too. So we got him diagnosed really early. Autism's this big, beautiful spectrum, and Arthur's kind of in the moderate to severe zone, limited verbal abilities, is going to require lifelong care, and is a pretty happy dude these days. He's got some good days and bad days. But I will tell you one story about him, that when Lynn said to say one thing about him. He had his first lie recently, and I'm really happy. Lying is sophisticated. And Arthur's never lied. And I came home and there was a pile of broken light bulbs, like a volcano of broken light bulbs. I was like, did you do that? And he said, no. I was like, he's lying. I was so excited. I had to not smile. I was like, okay. And then he goes, yes. So anyway, I was really proud of him, actually. Woo, Arthur, yeah. So I do believe Arthur is a part of our collective humanity. And one of his greatest gifts is expanding the definition of what it means to be normal. So Arthur holds up a mirror to the world, and he brings out so much goodness in the world by just being himself. So I also work at the Seattle Children's Autism Center. I switched careers right when we got the A word in our lives. And like Lynn said, I'm really happy and proud to be a part of a community of people who really care and love our children, and they don't have kids with autism. What's that about? It's beautiful. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, 3. All right. So here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to ask the question. We don't have to go in any particular order. We don't have to start with Nikki or start with Joy. If you don't want to answer a question, you don't have to answer a question, okay? And what I ask you to be is just honest and authentic, and take about 2 minutes to answer, okay? All right, here we go. Many parents describe getting an autism diagnosis as emotionally difficult. Was it emotionally difficult time for you? How so?
Parenting wasn't how the movies told me it would be. I wasn't going to get married and have typically developing children and watch all them milestones just come naturally. It was a change in direction. It was a huge change in direction, and I didn't really know what autism was, and I had no idea how differently it can present itself with having 2 children on both ends of the spectrum. The diagnosis was hard, but it gave me an answer when he was losing it in public that I could say to someone, he has autism, and they all scurry away because they don't know what to say to you. I've learned to embrace the A word. It's pretty great sometimes. The diagnosis was hard, but the evaluations for services I found even harder. The 3,000 forms, all asking the same questions, adding strengths that you had to find these strengths, but they were like, well, he likes to bounce and he likes to run away in public, and all these things that I had to add on these forms, and then you had to actually watch them gauge their level at things and watch them fail miserably. That was absolutely brutal for me. That was the hardest thing. But in hindsight, it was the starting point of things getting better, not continually getting worse. And Mac had a severe regression. He had 200 words at the age of 2, and he lost all of them. So it was just so hard to go through that process. And I had no idea that they would ever progress or he would ever change. Same with Freddie. I had no one in the family or friends with children with autism at the time that could tell me or give me hope that things would get better. So yes, it was a very difficult time.
Yeah, because Arthur's 17, I have a little perspective now, and I know it's a long life ahead of us, and when he's 25, I'll have different views. But if I just focus on the early diagnosis, because I'd love to talk about some of the highs we've had over the years, and some of the lows, but just dialing back to that, right when the doctor said, your son has autism, it was really scary. That's a big word. And I knew a little bit about it. I knew enough to know that we can't prognose his future. They can't look at him and say, well, he's a 2.3, which means he's going to be talking by the time he's 6, you know. That was scary, because not that talking defines a person as, you know, successful or happy, but all those things you kind of expect, and it's okay to expect. That's what we do in life. We want to look forward to things. We want to kind of have a little stability. So to hear that he had autism and that they didn't know what kind of autism it was going to be, and to be given a set of recommendations, none of which were covered by insurance except speech and, you know, and at that time ABA was and still is a very strongly recommended therapy for many kids, not all, with autism. It's very effective, and we've come a long way with it. I mean, Arthur can express his basic needs because of ABA, but at the time, it was not covered by insurance, and still isn't. And Arzu Farrow can tell you more about that from Washington Autism Advocacy if you have questions. But so it's like being told your son has a raging ear infection, and penicillin's not covered, and it's about $3,000 a month. You know, so my friends started a fundraiser, and they raised money. So those early days were mixed with despair that I couldn't give him some therapy that he needed to make him more able, not to cure him, but to make him more able. And we had to rely on the kindness of strangers. So I learned about grace, I learned about grief, and I had a lot of fear. And grief felt like a lot like fear. I would wake up at 3 a.m. saying, who's going to cut his toenails when he's 52? I mean, who thinks about that? But I did, and I had so much fear, and I had to work really hard, too, at the same time. So if you know about grief and fear, it's exhausting. I couldn't even walk up the stairs, but every surface area in my house had forms and things I had to fill out and services and to navigate and to understand. And there was DDA and ABA and your IEP and your IFSS, and, you know, so it was just mind-boggling. And I had another child to raise. So it was just complex time. But I knew at that moment I had to take a deliberate choice to find hope and happiness. So I turned to friends and family, and I started to, like Nikki said so beautifully, I kind of stopped battling with autism and it's Arthur, it's my son. He needs some services and support, and he's awesome. You know, so that turning point didn't take too long, but there was a lot of grief, and it's still thinking about it and talking about it brings back a little like pain. It was tough. So, and one last thing, music and art really helped me back then. For some reason, they just soothed my soul. So, to the new mamas, find what supports you like that.
Yeah, with Audrey, age 18 now, it's hard to think my way back to the early days when she was diagnosed. I do remember feeling some level of relief because she had been a kid. She was my firstborn and seemed to me perfectly normal for that first year of her life. And that after that is when I saw some regression where she stopped making eye contact, started having what I now know is perseverative behaviors. She'd make the same block tower over and over with the same 8 green square blocks and use the 8th one to knock it over and then start over. And she could do that for hours on end. So I knew something was wrong, and it was kind of hard to get that diagnosed at the time. I was describing these things without using the words that I now know. When I would see her pediatrician, and people weren't recognizing that what I was seeing was really a severe issue. So when we finally got this named as autism, it was a terrifying word to me. I didn't know a lot about it, but it was easier than not knowing what was going on. And I'm kind of an action person. There was no mindfulness back then. I heard I had deafness and I had autism on my plate, and I was going to find out everything that I needed to know to support my daughter through this and figure out how to not cure her, but help her move forward with this. And that is really where all my energy went for a number of years after that. So it was exhausting. When I look back, I kind of have this feeling of hurtling forward along a freeway. grabbing at things along the way and trying to force everybody to do what I felt needed to be done for my daughter. And I had to learn to back off a little and slow down and learn the systems and work the systems and work with people and kind of figure out what was going to happen. And then Audrey was diagnosed as deaf the same week I found out I was pregnant with her sister. So there was that whole piece going on, which at the time was a little bit terrifying. I'm very, very happy about it today because we would have stopped trying until we had figured things out with Audrey, and we would never have figured things out with Audrey. So I'm very grateful to have my 2 children and her sister in my life. But it was a difficult time. And looking back, I guess I'm saying this for parents who might be earlier on the path now, I wish I could tell my then self to be a little mindful, to slow down a little bit more, and to understand that killing myself trying to do all that was not going to move her forward. She has moved forward at her own pace throughout her 18 years of life. She sends me emails now. That's a brand new, the last 2 months, it's a goal in her IEP, and they're in her voice. And I just dance with delight every time I get a little email from her, which is, her email might be, Mom, Sunday clock time. And that is her asking what time I'm going to come visit her. She doesn't live at home anymore. She's been in a group home for 2.5 years now. So I think that would have happened regardless of how much I knocked myself out 18 years ago.
Thank you. Let's talk about going out in public. All right. Many parents say that it's a real challenge to take their child out in public because people who don't know autism misunderstand their behavior, stare, or judge, and sometimes say unkind things. Have you had an experience like this? And can you share one with us? Just one.
All right. Well, I do want to say something about the autism. It is, just to go back to that question real quickly, the word autism, it's if Arthur had a problem with his heart or his leg, we'd want to beat that, we'd want to fix that, It's his brain, it's his essence, it's his personality. So it's really complex. So I think you're hearing that a lot of us up here, especially, we don't want to fix our kid, we just want to make him more able. And this is a hard world for any of us, let alone if you have a social communication and behavioral disorder. So I just wanted to express that autism is Arthur. He's autism, and that's okay. Autism is not a bad word, and I think anyone in this room would agree that. Okay, one story. This is hard because it's a daily experience. We've had some rippers. I will say that in general, a cold stare, it can either destroy me for the day, or I don't care. I'm Teflon. It's like, you can look at me sideways, or give me the hairy eyeball, I call it, because he's jumping up and down, or he's making loud noises, or he's pulling down cereal boxes and making a perfect line down the middle of the aisle. Okay? It depends on where I'm at, but most of the time at this point, it's okay if I get a sideways glare, because I actually think odd behavior freaks people out a little bit, and they don't expect it, so it's scary to them. I'm an advocate for autism. I'm an ambassador, so I don't want to be mean back and go, "What's your problem?" It's like, well, he has autism. What's your problem? I don't do that. I go, "Oh yeah, this is Arthur. He has autism. Are you okay? Everything good here?" And people are like, "Oh, okay." But the one story I'll tell. We're in the bank. He's about 8 years old, and he's obsessed with nude nylons, not just nylons, but nude, tan. Okay, and people still wear those. I do sometimes. They're beautiful. So it make your skin look really nice. So we're in the bank. Up ahead of me, I'm like, oh, there they are, the nude nylons. And this woman's wearing them, and she's got a skirt on. And I've got his hand, the death grip. He's 8, and he broke free, went straight for the leg, and climbed it like a tree. And by the time I got there, he was thigh high. So I extracted him, and I said, "I'm so sorry, he's autistic." And she said, "I don't care if he's artistic. No one should be touching my legs." That's about the time I started passing out little cards that said, "Hey, my son has autism. This is Arthur. We're sorry if we upset you today. he's working so hard in this world to get by. We're doing all we can to bring out the best in him. Please accept our apology and know that he's doing his best. And here's a couple websites so you can learn about autism, and please look in your heart when things like this happen. So that's my one story, but 90% of the time I will say people are very kind. Arthur looks typically developing, and he doesn't act that way. So I think there's a wider range of normal now, and more people give you the smile. More and more. I still get the hairy eyeballs, and that's okay, but yeah.
So I had a transition. I definitely saw the stares. Mac wears his autism on his sleeve, and I adore him for it. He has a chew stick, and he's gnawing on it, and when he kind of found his voice again, he started singing, and it was the most beautiful choir boy singing, and then it dropped like 10 octaves, and it's now death metal, and it's like, and I don't even hear it anymore, but it's when you're out, you notice other people looking, and then you're like, oh, he is pretty noisy. He's the noisiest kid in the street, by far, and he's the nonverbal one. And yeah, people did stare, and I had a period of time, it was at least a year, where I didn't want to take him out, and it wasn't because it was who he is, it was his meltdowns and screaming, and Freddie was getting to the age where Freddie didn't want to go home after 15 minutes of being somewhere, and so he would lose it, and so both of them were losing it, and it was really traumatic, and it was a period of time that I really struggled with. And then we had one good trip out. It was to a pumpkin patch, which was super packed with people. And after that, I was like, screw it. We're going to spread autism awareness all over Seattle, the Seattle area. And so that's kind of how I approach it now. I don't have one example because he spreads autism awareness all the time. He ran through Marymore Park yesterday with his hands in the air, screaming his head off, and I don't see people staring anymore, and I thought it would take me a lot longer to get there, and it didn't. I actually think it's harder for parents of children that are verbal and look like they're melting down and they look like they're just a badly behaved child. I think that's more the comments, but with Mac, people, they might stare, I just don't really see it anymore, and that was a wonderful place to get to. And it doesn't stop me taking him out. We go everywhere.
Yeah, I remember at the beginning making a conscious decision to not worry about what people thought about. In fact, we had started with this deafness diagnosis, and she got hearing aids before she was 2. And somebody in my husband's family said, well, how do you feel about those hearing aids and, the fact that she stands out for having a disability? And I thought, well, that's a ridiculous comment. I couldn't care less. She can hear me now, hopefully. And I kind of just transferred that to autism when we got that diagnosis, which was harder because autism and her behaviors and I bet she could compete with Mac for loud voice, especially if she takes her cochlear implant off and cannot hear herself. It's, a much more obvious thing out there. But what has really limited our family's time out in the community and what we found really isolating was just more, nobody was having any fun when we went places. It was hard to take Audrey somewhere and get enjoyment for her because she was so easily overwhelmed. And as Margot got older, once she was no longer just a kid to push in a stroller along with us, then it was hard for her if we went somewhere for 20 minutes and had to just wrap it up and go home or push through. But my whole focus was on trying to maintain Audrey in a state of being able to just stay there so that her sister could have some kind of experience. Overall, reactions from other people have been overwhelmingly more positive than negative, I have to say. My best story isn't about tights, it's about bald heads. We were at Audrey was about 7 years old, probably 6 or 7. We were at a reading hour at the local bookstore, children's reading hour, and the man who was doing the reading was an African-American man with a shaved head. So, just very glowing and very striking for Audrey, I guess. And I was so happy because she was sitting with me. She doesn't usually sit and focus on something like that, but she was sitting in my lap while this story was being presented. She got up at one point and started moving around, and I kept a close eye on her because I thought she would leave. That would typically be what she would do. But she was going closer to him, and I thought, that's fabulous. She's really interested in this story, and she's trying to get closer so she can hear better. And I watched her kind of circle around sort of behind him, and I thought, this is great. She's getting closer. She's really engaged. And the next thing I know, she was right up behind him with her hands on his head. He was sitting on the floor and just rubbing his head in front of everybody. And I wanted to burst out laughing, but I was a little concerned about what he might think about what had just happened. And it turned out he worked as an aide in a classroom, in a self-contained classroom, and he was really familiar with this type of behavior. So he completely just turned up to her and, gave her a smile and said, thank you, I'm glad you're enjoying yourself, and kept reading to the other kids. It was fantastic, so.
Okay. If you haven't figured it out, having a sense of humor is a great coping skill. Where do you find support? So what have you done to prevent isolation? You've talked a little bit about getting out in the community. Can you share some specifics of what you've done or where you've gone to find support?
After moving here from the UK, and I had a couple of friends because I'd worked at Microsoft for a long time, but they didn't have children, and I had about a year of isolation, living in a typical world with two very non-typical children, and I crashed. I tried to project manage everything and tried to maintain a normal life, and I crashed after a year, and I saw a great counselor who helped me through some very, very dark times. And then Lynn talked me into going to a support group, and it's a very non-British thing to do. We don't sit in a circle and talk about our feelings. And so I went, and I still am best friends with the 4 women that I met that night. And then during the summer break from that, I realized that in this day and age, social media provides, or Facebook provides, that quick fix for support, and some people are actually not comfortable with the face-to-face support. And so I just had a couple of glasses of wine, maybe 3, and I looked to see what autism support groups were out there, fully expecting there to be one in this area. And autism, so I just looked at Autism Moms. There was Autism Moms of Kentucky, Georgia. There were all these groups, but nowhere anywhere near here. And so I just took the name Autism Moms of Seattle, and we hung out at like 20 moms for like 6 months, and then we got to like 100. And we're at 750 now, and the group's been going maybe 2.5, nearly 3 years. 3 years. But yeah, we're at 750 now, and the best thing I did was surround myself with autism moms. Autism playdates are the best. No one has to explain their children. They come to my house and they run feral, and if little Johnny doesn't want to wear his pants for the afternoon, that's totally fine. And it's wonderful for the mothers to connect. All of our children present differently. I've never met another Mac, and I've never met 100% another Freddie. But my support structure was the autism moms. Every single one of us has been through a diagnosis. We've all been through it, and there really is strength in numbers.
I'm one of those moms, and I find a lot of comfort in that group. When Arthur was diagnosed, it was a Friday at 4 o'clock, and the psychiatrist gave me a yellow sticky that said autism, and on the back it said feet. F-E-E-T. I'm like, oh, what is this? So I think he meant F-E-A-T, which was Families for Effective Autism treatment back then, or therapy. So I Googled feet and autism. You don't want to know. So don't Google autism the day after the diagnosis, for one. I learned that. But he also said they have support groups. And at that time, they didn't, but they do. They're a vibrant group. But the support group, I did find it was no longer. So I showed up, and there was closed. So it was just like, it was very dark time to not find support. So you seek it out. You almost like food. You need to be around other parents to hear what they're going through. So I had a lot of friends. I'm a raging extrovert. I had all these friends from college. I grew up around here. And what I found, and maybe a lot of parents do, is a lot of your friends move toward you and some move away. Not because they don't like you, it's complex. And you lose a lot of the common things. They're talking about their twice exceptional kid who's taking the APP Advanced Placement 619 test or something, and I'm like, huh? So paths just sort of, and I've not, we don't take trips, we didn't take a lot of vacations, Arthur didn't tolerate, which was fine. We were adjusting our life. Some people move closer, some move further. But I made a conscious decision to keep a hold of those friends, the ones that move towards me. They're my lifeblood, and they love Arthur, and it expanded his life too. Because now he's surrounded by people who just get him, more and more people that get him, that aren't necessarily in the autism world. But I do love my moms and dads who have kids with autism. We fall into each other. It's beautiful. I think my colleagues, the people that choose autism, are my friends, and they're my beloved people, because when they choose this world, which is amazing and satisfying and has its ups and downs, but I find a lot of comfort and hope around people that believe in autism and that care for people with autism. I said music and art really helped me, so I went toward the sensual world of visual things, and that was a huge support, and it got me from feeling isolated, because I could go on a website and look at art anytime in that 5-minute break I had that day. I also recently have turned to talking to self-advocates or people that have autism to learn more about that experience. For those people that are verbal and can tell me about it, I know every person's different. And that person who's verbal and maybe in college or driving or married probably isn't going to represent my son, but I'm still learning about autism, and I'm learning about what it looks like for everyone. So that's been really helpful and hopeful for me as a mom. And lastly, the one thing I think you'll get good at if you're a mom or dad in this world is getting to calm quickly. And maybe it's part of mindfulness, but I've really trained my brain to get calm fast. So if I have 5 minutes for the cup of coffee and I'm in the car, I can get calm fast, and I can get down to this calm place and then move on. So it's like rocket fuel, those quick moments. I couldn't do that before. It would take me like 3 beers. No, maybe 2. It would take me a lot to get calm. She likes wine, I like beer. What alcoholic beverage do you like? Oh boy, that was probably not something I should have said. But okay.
And here's the microphone. I'm a Scotch girl person.
Represented here.
So one of the things that kind of increased our isolation after the autism diagnosis was my ex-husband is French. We were living in Paris at the time that my daughter was diagnosed. My youngest daughter was born there. We moved back to Seattle. I'm from this area, essentially because we were not finding what we needed in France to support her. And I'd been in Paris for 15 years. So I was essentially kind of starting my life over without this network of friends nearby, a few people that I still knew from around here. And I don't think I am a raging extrovert. I've always gotten by with a few really good friends. And so I kind of learned to pick my friends different, for different reasons. It is what you were describing a little bit, Katrina, about there's people who come towards you and people who move away. And I discovered that someone who couldn't share in the stories that I needed to tell about what my family is like, they didn't need to have the same kind of family, but they needed to be able to sit with me and laugh with me, even with my most irreverent sense of humor, and kind of be on this journey with me. And I have met some fabulous people who are able to do that and have made closer friends, I would say, since getting this diagnosis for my daughter than I had had previously in life. And I love support groups because I'm American. So I immediately went looking for all kinds of support groups. What I would say, and I don't know what the landscape looks like out there now, there may be a lot of different support groups and they're not all a fit. There were support groups where I didn't feel particularly supported. And what I would tell myself now is don't stick with those. It was just because we were in a different place, right? Like, there were support groups for people with kids who were deaf, and those didn't necessarily fit with what we were experiencing, which went way beyond that. So, yeah, friendships, people, that's really how I reached out. And I would say the professionals that I've met over the years, Nearly every teacher that Audrey has had has become a friend. Nearly every instructional assistant that she has had, and most of them have stuck with her for several years in a row, has become a friend. So those are people who just amaze me. Like you said, they choose to work with a kid like Audrey. I would never choose to work with a kid with autism. I love the work that I do with parents. I love the work that I do with the community. Personally, I find that part of working with the kids completely overwhelming. I can manage it with my daughter, and I'm so impressed and so really in love with the people who choose to do that, because they have brought so much value to my daughter's life.
I'm going to check in with Bev. How much time do we have?
Well, we started 15 minutes late, so let's just assume that we've got 15 minutes.
We've got 15 minutes. Okay. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then I thought, let's open it up for your questions. All right. We talked a lot about self-care this morning. So can you tell us how you manage to take care of yourself and give us a couple of examples?
I do remember the first person who told me you need to remember to take care of yourself, and just kind of wanting to slap her and say, and who's going to sit with my kids while I do that? Like, how it's easy to say, hard to do. But I did learn the value of, I think the hardest thing for me to overcome had been thinking, well, there's no point. I am sleeping maybe 3 hours a night. My days are fully stressful with managing my daughter's behaviors and trying to get help for her, and raise my second daughter as normally as I could, or give her as good a family experience as possible. What difference will it make if I do manage to get someone to sit with her for an hour or 2 hours? That can't possibly make a difference. It does make a difference. Once I learned to do it, I realized, yes, if I can step out of this house and go have, so here's my example, a really good hot chocolate somewhere with my notebook and do a little journaling, or just sit and gaze off into space and sip at this hot chocolate like it is the best thing I've ever had. It does. I come back refreshed. I still am lacking sleep. I am still overwhelmed. I'm still stressed, but finding myself in that space of that time makes all the difference to being able to move forward. And then sometimes I would manage to expand those 2 hours into maybe a whole day somewhere on my own. My self-care is mostly not huge things. It's mostly something like that, getting 2 hours to myself without any demands on me during that time. One of my good friends took me to my first pedicure when I turned 40. I'd never had a pedicure before. I have never gone back. I go every 3 weeks. I've gone every 3 weeks since then. I'm 49 years old now. It was one of the best things that she ever did for me. And that's part of my self-care. I choose a place that's quiet, that has, soft music. It costs a little bit more than it would somewhere else, but that's part of what I do for myself on a regular basis. So maybe my toes will get to show themselves this year in Seattle at some point. I don't know. But I know they're there.
Believe it or not, a lot of my self-care is that I work. I work for Microsoft, and when we moved here, I had 3 months off before my work visa came through, and I went back to work. I don't work 90 hours a week. Since I had children, I don't kill myself for my job anymore. Children are the priority. But I felt bad about it for a long time, and I absolutely don't anymore. Autism, the behaviors are incredibly intense and challenging, and that doesn't have to mean a meltdown. It can mean lack of engagement, or I said this to a friend a few years ago, that typical children continually validate that they're meeting their milestones. They continually give you that confidence that you're doing a good job as a parent, and autism children generally don't. And so the guilt factor is way higher than with typical parents. So yeah, work is my sanity. Do I absolutely love Azure and the cloud and all the things that I do? Probably not, but I love my job. It's not about autism, it's about me, and I get to be me at work. The other thing I learned to do, and I generally never had a problem with this, is you don't have to look after my child in the way I look after my child. Take the help. Like, if you trust that person with your child, walk out the door. I've walked out the door with them screaming before, not about me leaving, but about something that didn't go right, and just walk out the door and go. It doesn't matter if you go sit in Starbucks for an hour, or if you go for a walk in the park, or if you go away for a week or a weekend, that's also okay. I go to the UK for 10 days every year, and it's wonderful. And I sit on my mum's couch, and she brings me tea, and she just brings carbohydrates to me every 2 or 3 hours, and I come back, 10 pounds heavier, but just take it. It's something you have to learn to do, but it's not only good for you, it's good for your children, that they learn that you don't have to be there 24/7 and that they're okay with other people.
I want to have a British accent. You have a beautiful voice. Sorry you have to listen to my Washington accent. Washington is my... all right. I think I've kind of touched on this, so I'll go briefly. I'm very deliberate and intentional about my self-care. It's almost like, you have to make something a habit, because when Arthur was little and I really was in overdrive, and believe me, there was no self-care. Even when people say, you really got to take care of yourself, got to put on that oxygen mask before you blah, 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 So are you kidding me? No, because there was so much I had to do, and I really didn't feel like it. I didn't feel like being calm. I didn't feel like being relaxed. I was on a mission. I was, and that's crazy, but don't make me relax, Oprah Winfrey, with your hot bath and your high thread count sheets. I mean, I don't feel like it. Didn't take long to where it was probably going to kill me if I didn't start taking care of myself, right? So I was intentional, deliberate, went through the motions, and about 3 months, I was like, wow, this feels pretty good, and I'm a way better mom for him. And I've coped a lot better. So deliberate, intentional, and then I just chose the things that spoke to me, that made me feel good, and that was like food, music, art, people. The car was really relaxing for me, if that's something. It can be, because my son didn't like to go many places, and I tried to meet him halfway. I'm not going to drag him to every community event, but I also know getting out into the community is a good skill he needs for the rest of his life. He's going to have to go to the bank or the grocery store. He's going to have to do some things in his life. So I always balanced, like, we got to go out, we got to rock his world a little, and then we'll go home and he can chill in the basement like he likes to do. Love to meet him halfway. But those car rides were bliss, because he's locked in, right? I got the angel guard thing right there. He can't undo it. We'd take the long way around the lake. It was so peaceful, and that helped me. So I weaved it into our existing life.
All right, thank you. I want to open it up to your questions now. We have a microphone that works? We do. Oh, we have 2 microphones that work. What question do you have for our panelists?
So my son is autistic, and he's 4 years old. We were just recently at a school event at my daughter's elementary school, and he kind of acted out. He took his clothes off during a movie, and Mom was uncomfortable about it. And I tried to explain to her that he had autism, and she kind of was pushing back at me, and I immediately just shut down, broke down. I need maybe examples of what I can say or whatnot. I've seen the cards, so I thought about getting a card or something to kind of pass out. But how do you stay cool, calm, and just say, he's autistic, and you take this?
I'll just quickly chime in, because I know these guys have a lot of experience with that. It's painful. I don't feel like I stressed that enough when I was saying how hard it can be to get not only an evil little glance or kind of a disapproving, but when someone says something and when you're already stressed and sad and scared and freaked out a little bit, and then someone's not understanding, it's a blow. It hurts. So I'll just say that, it hurts. Over the years, instead of firing back, if I'm too emotional, I really would hand the card. And I know in that situation it might be kind of weird. Here's a card, but it's just to say, this is hard for me too, so I'm just going to give you this. And I remove myself from the situation, or I go somewhere else. I also tried to take a compassionate view, like that person really doesn't understand. They don't know autism. They don't know how hard it is sometimes you can't manage your kids' behaviors sometimes. They're going to do what they do. So it comes with time, thicker skin, have some tools about you, and then visualize ahead of time what you're going to do if it happens, and kind of walk yourself through it. But most of all, mom to mom, I'll just say it's hard sometimes, I know. Yeah.
I'm really sorry that happened to you, and and it is hard, like Katrina said. I don't know that I'm as gracious as you are in being an ambassador to the community about autism. One of the things that I realized early on is that I can't teach everybody, and my job is to teach my daughter. When Audrey's having a hard time out in public or doing something that's not socially appropriate, she's undressed frequently in places where she's not supposed to. Loves to run back into the swimming pool once she has her swimsuit off and jump back in. And who wouldn't, you know? But I feel like my job and the focus in those stressful times has to be on her and teaching her what's expected of her, getting her through that situation. So the cards that I had when I just did little handwritten ones for a while would say, my daughter has autism. My job right now is to teach her. And then I had a website reference for people, and it was a little bit of a brusque message. But I didn't, and I often don't. I don't always have the patience with people who would push back on something like that. I feel like my role is to help my daughter, and there's a lot of information out there. People can go inform themselves, and I wish I could be more gracious about it and sound like but you don't have the energy for everything, so I think forgiving myself and saying, hey, this part is what I can do, that's what's gotten me through.
Well, I'm not gracious at all when things like that have happened. I have barked at many people. I haven't taken minutes to do it, but I've definitely snapped and shouted. One thing I will say is at the age of 4, your diagnosis is still quite raw. And it still probably feels quite new, and it's hard enough. The behavior in public's hard enough without somebody coming back on you, and over time, within a year or 2 years, I just cared less. Like, even if someone says something to me today, I might just say he has autism and I'll walk away, but it doesn't linger with me for the rest of the day or the weekend like it used to. And then it does get easier, and I kind of I realized what I care about, and I really care about advocacy and awareness and our children being out in public no matter what. Just cared less and see it as, well, that person saw autism today, and yesterday they didn't know what it looked like, and now they do. But I understand how hard it is when someone actually says something.
And at times like that, you know what? That's when you really need self-compassion. Is name it. This hurts. Other parents probably experience this. Mm-hmm. What do I need right now? May I be gentle with myself? May I be forgiving of people who don't understand? Something as simple as that sometimes can help to acknowledge what you're feeling. Other questions? Is it a scientific one?
As part of self-care, I find it important I'm finding it important to try and figure out how many different therapies I have 3 kids with autism, to figure out, I'm not doing this right. How do you figure out your therapy balance with your child, and where you draw your limits of, you know what, I can do this much per week, but now I'm done?
I will admit that in those early years, by which I mean probably the first 10 to 12 years, I found my limit when I was sobbing on the bathroom floor at the end of the day, and in the bathroom floor so that my other daughter wouldn't see me falling apart. And I would just get I would hit these moments of clarity when I had gone way too far, where I thought, I can't maintain this anymore. I'm working, and I have this therapy schedule that feels crucial, right? It feels crucial that she get to all of these therapists that have been recommended at this pace. But I'm only human. And so that's my answer. So I would realize after the fact. I think that now the way that I approach this is looking at, okay, what is feasible in a week? Not what do I feel like she needs, because she's always going to need more. She doesn't live at home anymore. I visit her. I'm still highly involved in all of the different therapies and supports that she gets, and I could still be doing way more than I am. because I feel that she needs way more than she's getting at all times. So I have to look at my energy, my schedule, what my other daughter needs. The good things in my life that I'm allowed to maintain, I've had to learn to tell myself, I'm allowed to have that space in my life where I just get to be happy for a couple days and not think about what my daughter needs that she's not getting because I'm doing this. And I know Lynn didn't like the word balance, I think, but there is an element there of creating a schedule in your life that is just doable and that doesn't eliminate all of the positives and all of the parts that you need also.
The best advice I got when Arthur was really young is you do what your family can do. So I was told he needed 30 hours of ABA. We couldn't do 30 hours of ABA. We couldn't afford it for one. And we couldn't do it physically and mentally. I had another kid, had other commitments. We did what our family could do. And that felt good to me. I didn't feel like I was cheating him on anything.
I think when you get the diagnosis, you're given a list of recommended services. And as a parent, you feel like if you don't check all those boxes, that you're going to fail your child in some way, and that's not the case. I mean, my house has a revolving front door of therapists in and out, and I think I tried all of those things, and well, if he doesn't do hippotherapy, and if he doesn't, and just stop. Like he does his ABA and he does his speech and his OT, and you just find your own balance, and it's all to do with guilt and acceptance, and you kind of just get to a good place. The very first autism mom I met gave me the best advice I ever had, and she said, don't be your child's therapist. She said, be their mom. And every moment doesn't have to be a learning moment. And so my children, they work harder than I do. If they're not in school, they're in therapy, and if they're not in therapy, they're in school. And so evenings and weekends, they're feral, and they run feral in the house, and there's no limits on screen time, and we go out and we do things, and they eat candy, and they have ice cream after dinner, and they get to just be children, and they can stim, and they can repeat things, and they can do all the things that they can't do when they're in a clinic setting or when they're doing ABA, and that's kind of the balance that I found.
And that, folks, is called good enough parenting. Time that we have. How about a big round of applause for our panelists?